Vaccines and the future of our fight against the virus have captured investors' attention over the last few months. But of course, the background of this is the worst situation in terms of the real effects of the current virus situation that we've had since this whole thing started. Let's bring in Amelia Bourdeau, joining us, an advisor at Exanta Data, to walk through what their team is seeing right now. Amelia, it's always great to have you guys on the show, as you've done such a good job following all this information. What I want to try and figure out here is the current status of the surge we're going through. We've all been really focused on the optimism coming in after these vaccines, but what's the situation right now?
So the situation right now is we got some new news late last week out of the United Kingdom, which is obviously people have seen that there's a new strain of the virus circulating in the UK. The UK did go into a tighter lockdown to try to suppress this new strain of the virus, which they have evidence of, although it's not completely conclusive, that it spreads kind of at a higher, it's a higher transmission, it spreads faster. And so that's some bad news. That strain of the virus has also been found in Belgium, in the Netherlands, so we know that it is spreading. We haven't had evidence that it's here in the United States yet, but it very well could be. About 5,000 UK residents flew from the United Kingdom and entered the United States in November. So if you look at the transmission rate, that would be about 50 or 60 people on that who entered the United States in November from the United Kingdom that may have had the virus and possibly the new strain. So we just have to look at some of the lockdowns, and what we have to ask ourselves, what are the measures that countries are taking to fight this new strain, and how will they weigh on economic growth?
Is there anything in the UK virus data that suggests there's something unique happening there as we try and figure out if this strain has already been something that's been moving through that population, or if it's going to have an impact on kind of the current COVID curves? Because it looks like some of these might be peaking, we hope, kind of right now. But is there anything in the UK that suggests that there's something unique happening there that is problematic due to this new strain?
That is a chart of the UK you're showing, and you see the cases there rising in the United Kingdom, and that red bar is a new peak. So they've recently reached a new peak in their cases, which is too bad because they did have a kind of a light lockdown, and now they've moved into a heavier one. To get back to what you were asking me, though, the UK is very advanced and frequent genome sequencing of its COVID data and COVID strains, and that's why they likely, perhaps it's speculated, found this new strain earlier than other countries. So it may not be something special to the UK, they just may have found it because of their more advanced genome sequencing first. And so we don't exactly know if it's here in the US, but if you watch some of the virologists or listen to them speak, they believe it's probably spread here as well, which is unfortunate. In terms of our regions in the United States, the Midwest had experienced this third wave a little bit earlier than we did, than the rest of the country, for instance. And so the Midwest did take some measures, and they brought down their cases. And it looks like recently fatalities have now peaked in the Midwest. But we still have cases rising in the West and the South and a little bit in the Northeast, and we still have fatalities projected out, unfortunately, to continue to rise in those regions, in the Midwest, and I'm sorry, not in the Midwest, in the South and in the West, especially California. So fatalities, unfortunately, haven't peaked for all U.S. regions yet. And we have to kind of ask ourselves, what will the holiday travel do? We saw kind of 10 days after Thanksgiving, more case growth in the U.S. And we do know that people are traveling in the United States ahead of the holidays. We have some TSA data that shows people are flying, though it's still really depressed compared to last year, but people are on the move. And so that may impact the numbers, post the Christmas and New Year holiday. But we do have some states that are doing better. They're mostly in the Midwest. It's Colorado, Minnesota, Michigan have really brought down their growth rates. And states that are struggling are California, Hawaii, Florida, and Tennessee, especially. Tennessee, when we track the worst counties in the U.S. in terms of new cases per capita, of the top 20 worst counties, Tennessee counties make up 11 of them. Wow. So Tennessee struggling right now.
So a few kind of isolated areas that you're watching very closely in terms of the regions as we're looking at here, cases and deaths. Looks like they're peaking for this particular Midwest, us here in Chicago, where things did ramp up. You can see that red line went up more quickly than the latest surges on the West Coast in the Northeast. But just from what we know about how this virus works, I mean, it seems like it has these kind of cyclical patterns where it comes up, it rises, then it goes down again. Generally, that's what we've seen. We don't see a lot of prolonged kind of sideways movement in these charts because usually things get locked down, and we're all locked down, right? So if we're staying in this situation, should we expect those other curves to generally kind of follow what we saw in the Midwest?
It depends on the measures that the individual states are taking. I think California is a really interesting case right now because it is quite locked down. They've taken severe measures, but yet the cases continue to rise there. And we have to ask ourselves, why is that? Is the virus transmission very high there? The caseload is, are people just socially distanced? They're fatigued of social distance, so they're not kind of self-policing or following the restrictions that have been put in place, and they're not being enforced. So we have to ask why. California is an interesting case. It is it's locked down compared to other states, and the cases are still rising. But kind of some of the lockdown lights that you mentioned that were more temporary in other parts of the Midwest that were earlier this fall, or earlier kind of in the mid-region fall, they did work, and the cases are being brought down. So we need to ask ourselves, especially if this new strain is found in the U.S., what type of measures can we have to combat it? I mean, obviously one of them, which is very positive news, is the rollout of the vaccine that we're having. So we're a little bit in a race of perhaps this new strain, if it does spread more quickly, if that is the case, the new strain versus the rollout of the vaccine, this race. So the rollout of the vaccine, extremely important, maybe even more important than it was last week in terms of thinking about it. It needs to get out there, and it needs to get out there quick, and there can be no kind of hiccups in it, meaning in terms of distribution or production, because that would be very bad for markets, very bad for the health of people here in the United States.
To come back to the UK, to kind of come full circle, the spike that we most recently saw in that chart for the UK, do we know if that's about the new strain that was found there, or is there something in their lockdown dynamic where maybe they opened up again or something? Is there something else that can explain what we saw in the UK chart at the beginning?
It's hard to pinpoint. They did have a lockdown a few weeks ago, which they did ease. And so the cases started to rise when they eased the lockdown. And now, in addition to easing the previous lockdown, they found the new strain. They think it's being transmitted quite quickly. It is in kind of the south of London, the Kent area. And so they've taken very drastic recent steps. I mean, even Prime Minister Boris Johnson said basically Christmas is canceled this year in the UK, which is very, very sad. The other point that we should make in terms of Eurozone is there are restrictions being put in place in the Eurozone, especially, say, Germany right now. France was very locked down. And so that will weigh on Eurozone growth into the first quarter. So that's something else that's important to remember as well.
Okay, so we're sacrificing the economic growth for getting these curves under control. Looks like at least there's some signs of hope that maybe these are peaking if the status quo kind of remains for current lockdown scenario. Seems to be an important takeaway here. Amelia, really good stuff, and always appreciate you guys joining us in the walkthrough. Amelia,
and I should say that if anyone wants updates to these charts, we don't have to leave it here. We update them daily on our Twitter account, exantedata.com. If you want to see just Exante Data on Twitter, if you want to see how they develop.
Thank you very much. And we do oftentimes, we update them right here. We use you guys' stuff and cite you almost every day because it's the best place to get these data on a regular basis. Always really good stuff. Thank you, Amelia. Amelia Bourdeau.
Thank you.
Thank you, an advisor at Exante Data.